Welcome, everyone. This is Kate Tachik, Manager of the Funding Information Network here at Foundation Center. We're very excited today to be talking to all of you. So on the call right now, we have many of our Funding Information Network supervisors, but some of our own Foundation Center staff as well. And today we're going to be hearing from Tracy Waxler, our Director of Subscription Products here at Foundation Center. And she's going to be telling us a bit of what's coming up next for FDO. This is going to be a combination of some presenting kind of the evolution of FDO Foundation Directory Online as a product, taking a look at some of the new looks that we'll have for it, and actually doing a little bit of live demoing as well. So you'll be able to ask questions. Feel free to chat your questions to us as we go, and we'll answer what we can and then save the rest for Tracy to respond to it towards the end of the session. And we will help mediate any issues that you're having with audio. Both Cynthia and I are here in the room as well. So if you're having any issues, we're available on chat as well. So for now, I'm going to turn it over to Tracy.
All right, thanks, Kate. Hi, everybody. Happy Tuesday. So Kate invited me kindly to give you a sneak preview of what's coming. We are in the midst of a major user interface change and upgrade for FDO. So I want to talk a little bit about why we're doing that, and when I think of results in this context, how I actually think of them. The framework that I'm looking at this is, are we getting great results for the people who use this product? In other words, are we giving them good lists of prospective funders? Are we helping them get insights into those funders? Are we helping them see this through the lens of maybe peer organizations and other recipients? Bottom line is that folks use FDO primarily to find money. And these changes are all made to help that be a much more intuitive, insightful process for them, and that actually means upgrading our user interface in a pretty significant way, I'd say, because we're dealing with a product that, we've made small iterative changes, but it still functions largely like a database. And I think, the vision is that in order for us to really help people find the right funders for them, help fund their mission, and move on to actually their mission work, we need to sort of fundamentally make a shift so this is all working more like an application, speak to them as humans, not speak to them as database people. All of that stuff is critically important, but increasingly it's operating under the hood. And there's a balance there to have as much of that operate under the hood, but still give the user control to really fine-tune the kind of search that they do. But again, it's not so much that they're using this to do a search, they're using this to find money, and that's always top of mind for me. So, I can't let go of my favorite TV show, and here's what's next. To get us here, I just want to give a nod out to the fact that this took an enormous amount of infrastructure upgrade to do this. We, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, embarked on and completed a major upgrade to our infrastructure, which, cutting to the chase means that we now code about a couple million. Last year alone, we coded over 2 million grants. We used to only code a couple 100,000, like say 200,000 to 300,000 a year. So if you're looking at a factor of 10 increase, that allows us to bring a bunch of new features to the application that give the users a lot more intelligence. So we're going to do a little compare and contrast. I can pop to a live demo for part of this, but here's basically the search experience today in FDO. In the last, 6 months, we made a couple of changes. They're iterative changes to prioritize the search screens that are, in fact, most important for a user, on the search fields, rather, most important for a user to get really good results. Most people are looking for a list of funders, so the most important things for them are looking by subject.
I think we got to pause. I think we've got an audio issue. I think it's because of our presenter right here. I'm really sorry. Give me 1 second here. Hi, everyone. We need to do just a quick sound check here. If folks could submit in the chat if they are hearing us. If anybody has been able to, okay, so folks are able to hear us. Okay, good. Sorry, just needed to double check there because we're getting a lot of messages. Great, thanks. So it sounds like a number of you are hearing us. If you aren't, I would recommend that you go ahead and close out and log back in, and you'll get the option to connect by voice, by your computer, or by phone, or if you've had to call in. So please go ahead and do that, and we'll go ahead and keep rolling with Tracy. So apologies for any of the issues on that. We had to make a quick last-minute edit. So it looks like rebooting is your best option. Also, this is all being recorded, so you'll be able to access it again as well. Okay, sorry about that. Thanks. I'll turn it back over to Tracy.
I'm back. Okay, everyone. So, we made some upgrades here. We said the most important thing for someone to use is the field of interest, geographic focus, etc. But we're making folks today make a choice based on database infrastructure. Do you want to look at it from a search grant makers, search grants, search companies, search 990s, etc.? Hold that thought. Right now we're looking at the search grant maker screen, which is what we have today, because that's the way most users navigate through. But these choices here are going to go away because they're fundamentally not necessary. So again, just today, this is what your search results look like. We have lots of left-hand index choices here to narrow your search. You can modify your search here, start a new one, all this basic tooling. We take location things and we mash them together into one field. Again, thoughts I want you to hold. We look at total assets and total giving. This total giving has nothing to do with your search criteria, in this case, ballet in New York. Coming soon. What if you could talk to this application like a real person?
Oh, great.
Would that be nice?
That would be nice.
That would be nice. So I'm going to show you these screenshots first, and then I'm going to try to see if we can be so audacious as to live demo. So what you're trying to do is find funding. These artificial, unnecessary, not artificial, they're real. These unnecessary choices, though, are going to go away. Right? You're just going to tell us what you want funding for. You can either type in real language. In this case, we've typed in ballet in New York. It has automatically parsed it to facets of our taxonomy, subject, location, a population here. You'd be able to clear or edit this. And that's all you have to do. We'll talk about the rest of these things in a bit. However, for some folks, that feels like a total loss of control. Some of us are control freaks. I won't name any names, but I might be one of them. So if you were to just hit this advanced search button here, you would get a little more control back. You'd have these search areas that you're used to seeing, where you could type in a subject area, you could type in a geographic area served. This geographic area served will be fundamentally different in the new UI. Today, we don't have geo area served in our fine application. We have geo focus, or you can type in the location of a recipient or a funder. In the new UI, it will be a combination of geo focus being what the funder tells us, what the funder tells us about where they fund. Finally got that right. But that's really not enough, right? We want evidence from grants. So if we look at grant descriptions and location of the recipient, those two factors are the geography where the money is being served. So in the future, geo area served will be a combination of where they tell us they fund, where the grant data tells us that they fund, and in absence of a grant description that gives us location of where the money is, we will use the location of the recipient. So again, right on the top, you have the top 3 most important things if you're going to fill out any search criteria at all: subject, geo area served, population served. Now you'll notice we've got organization name, organization location, and keyword. These 2 fields, org name and location, notice how we haven't said grant maker name or recipient name or company name, because in the future, those things go away. If I wanted to look at Ford, I would type in Ford. I would see a list of names of institutions. In parentheses, we'd see that they were grant makers or recipients, and we'd select the one they want. But the notion of type ahead comes into play in all of this, and I'll show you a little bit of that in a minute. In all of these 5 fields, we are going to force users, and force is a good thing in this context, into our taxonomy. The reason why that's a good thing is it's going to guarantee that they're searching on a criteria that actually has some results. If they type in a subject area and it's not a match to anything, they can just go back here to get a match. So control still these 6 boxes. The only box that doesn't force into the taxonomy is keyword. So you can still do something which would then navigate you through the labyrinth of endless and endless 990s. However, there are other filters and criteria that may be important to any particular grant seeker. Support strategy, transaction type, the organization type. So say I only want to look at government agencies, or I only want to look at grant-making public charities, oftentimes really critical for local searches. I could do that right here. Again, these will force you into the taxonomy, and you'll be able to see that hierarchy. And then we've got some basic filtering. So that's what that looks like today. And then we get to a results page. So what's different about the results page? Well, this is different. Whatever your search criteria is, you're going to get, and this is dummy data. These are mock-ups, right? So this isn't real. So don't fact check me on this and tell me that you know for a fact there are 100 grant makers who do ballet in New York. They may be. But all of a sudden you're going to get a summary. So you, as a user, have a sense of, was that, like, intuitively, if you know your field, you're saying ballet in New York, 74 grant makers. I know there are way more grant makers than that. I'll show you in a minute how the type ahead works. And you would then think, maybe I have to go up a level. So maybe not all the grants and information that we have in the system are specifically tagged for ballet, but isn't it a reasonable assumption that a funder who's funding dance, for instance, might be good? So if you look at this, you can kind of get a little gut check here. So we'll give you a summary of how many grant makers, how many grants, how many recipients, and then all the 990s. Another thing that's new about this screen is the amount funded. Today, assets and total giving is all you get. The amount funded is really important because let's take the example of Rochester Area Community Foundation. Right? They are, in fact, larger than CAFRIT's, and they have more total giving than CAFRIT's. But if we consider the amount funded in ballet in New York, so, you know, in the old UI, this looks like, oh, they're the biggest. In the new UI, we actually see, in fact, that they're not. Their grant count is a third of the largest giver in the market, and the amount of actual funding is really minuscule. So this, in fact, shouldn't be your top priority, but CAFRIT should be. That's all intelligence that we never were able to supply in just basic search results.
And so just to clarify there, because I think that's an important distinction. So now we're seeing not the largest giving by general giving, but the largest giving in the actual area that you're looking for. So I'm seeing that this is actually the donor that's giving the most to ballet specifically rather than just generally in Rochester.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Bingo. All right. So that goes away. So the type ahead. So this is subject area.
We've got a quick question that we should clarify.
What?
UI. What do we mean by when we keep saying UI? Yep. An important question.
I have a cursive acronym. UI is user interface. Sometimes used interchangeably with UX, but kind of different. But user experience would be UX. UI, user interface.
So a lot of what's happening to FDO is major changes to the UI.
Yeah. And the infrastructure
interface.
Yeah. But a lot of the infrastructure improvements that we made are actually enabling us to do things like amount funded, to generate on the fly these 4-box summaries. You know, all important stuff that if you don't have an upgraded infrastructure, right, it would take hours and hours and hours for that information to render on the screen. So we did a lot of changes to actually help us do that. So type ahead is another part that, as I said, you know, the beloved left-hand indexes aren't necessarily beloved by all of us in full disclosure mode. So what we, sorry about that, I close that. So what we want to do is give the user the intelligence that they need to make the right choice, right? So you start typing health, we're going to show you everywhere that appears. You'll also see it in the hierarchy. So that if you start to do healthcare management, you know, maybe if the results there were too narrow, unlike the left-hand index today, which are completely flat, right? Now you'll see the hierarchy and know when you should go up a level. Do you have any questions coming in on that? Just so I can check. Okay.
So I will just clarify. So this is going to replace that index that you would browse either by alpha or by already having to have magically known what the word is in the taxonomy that you're looking for, and you type that in. So many of us that are familiar with FDO have probably gotten used to some of those key terms when a user comes in and is asking, you know, I'm working with kids after school, and we know to look for youth development, for example, or whatever the term in the taxonomy is officially. But in this case, it would be more intuitive, and you'd be able to type in and then find where that term falls in the taxonomy.
Yeah. Would it be helpful if I showed a little bit of that?
I think that would be very helpful.
All right, let's do that. So we're entering the zone of live demo. So this, you'll notice, is in development now. You guys are really getting a chance to see some stuff that's under hood. So does it look as pretty as the screenshots I just showed, which looked more like this? Nope. It looks more like this. So bear with us. I'm going to do an advanced search here. So I'm going to get rid of ballet, and I'm going to start to type health. And all of a sudden, it starts to come up. So I can make a selection. I can make multiple selections, and all of this stuff will start to render. Yeah, and that's actually not built yet, but so again, I'm forcing that you into the taxonomy. I'm giving you some intelligence about where you should go. Let's look at the ballet example now. Ballet, right? So see how before I said I typed in 3 letters, I'm getting what I want, but I can see if that gives me results that are too narrow, how I should go up the tree to broaden my search. So that's what's going to happen in these 5 boxes. Let me see if I can type in organization name. So let's type in Ford. And right there we've got Ford.
Which now if you type in Ford Foundation, I think you get like a whole whole slew of things that have Ford in it. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me try to, it looks like only the grant makers wore it in. But what you're going to look at for here is, you know, the other reason we're doing this is, especially for, you know, a new nonprofit who's coming into the library and they've just started out, but they know they're at the point where they can get that first grant. understanding what Ford or even a small local foundation does and what they're going to fund, how they make those decisions is, there's that ad that's running now, like how do you go to the bank for a mortgage, right? You do all this thing. You have no idea what's happening behind the curtain, right? But you may know, and in fact you probably know really well, who your peer organizations are. Kate's got a homeless shelter in New York. I've got a homeless shelter in New York. Kate's been at it a while, but we both have a facility that's about 150 beds. Who's going to fund me? Well, I have no idea where to start. I'm going to look at Kate. And I'm going to see that Kate's got a list of funders, and I'm going to go, maybe they have some more money. Or I'm going to see that Kate has certain types of funders or has done certain types of funding. And then I can start to model my approach by looking at a peer organization. So then from here, I can start to navigate through by recipients or by grant makers. And if I've done a search for ballet, why should I care if it's a grant maker, a federal government agency, a company? Like, who cares? Whoever's giving money, just tell me who they are, right? So navigate through it that way.
And we did get a quick question from Deborah Brewer. She had asked, are we still going to see those numbers next to the terms? And then she saw, of course, that what it's going to do is change these dynamic block of numbers as your results are going. So you're going to see those aggregates, but they're actually going to have much more context and reality than those numbers did that just sat next to the terms before, because those weren't as, I would say, probably as meaningful. Right. Yeah.
So let's go back here. So this is
I did have another question that we might want to ask now. So, and I think it speaks to what you were just saying, that when we're searching for who's funding ballet, we don't care what sort, we care whether they're funding. So, are the private foundations and nonprofits included in that data set? Yes. And grant making nonprofits.
Yes, absolutely. So this is the results page. I'll show it to you live. There's just a little bit of screen lag in it, so I'm going to stick with this for now. So in addition to the grant makers, grants, and recipients, right, that means you're going to be able to navigate through a list of any of these things right there. So here's your grant makers, here's your recipients, grants and then recipients. The 990s are further down the page. Oops. So let me try going to live demo again a little bit. So I want to look at grants. I can just click and take me to the summary. I've got page results. It'll show me how many results there are again. I can view all. This is the list of all the grant makers. Remember I said hold that thought about how we combine city, state, and country today? Now all of that is parsed out, so I can sort on any of these things. The default sort will be grant count and amount funded, secondarily amount funded. The idea is who has the most activity, which would be maybe how you want to prioritize things. You'll see the icon for government funders here, so you can filter those out. Past funders will not show up in the libraries because it's based on, the actual user. But if you do have nonprofits who are coming in who are kind of on that cusp where they may be at the verge where having this in their office would be helpful. Right? These are some of the features that would appear for actual subscribers because that runs off the organization name. So let me go back. If I look at the grants list, and then if I want to look at just the Cafford's Foundation, there's a pop-up list right here, and then I can view all of them. Similarly, so a full list of, sorry. All right. That may not be wired up just yet, but recipients, again, you can see all of these fields. We'll sort it by the grant count. and then largest amount secondarily. And then all the 990s are there. So you'll notice there are 990s and 990 PS. But actually, most of these would end up being 990 PS. This is just a mock-up. Any questions before I?
Yeah, we've got a few. So just a couple questions on. Well, a couple questions around numbers. So how is the amount funded defined? Sorry, is that?
It would be based on your search criteria.
So what's
the search criteria right now is ballet, New York, children and youth. So anything that falls into that is what this column is.
And the years then are
for whatever we have. And
what is the scope of?
We go back as far as 2003 currently. We may actually end up trimming that back to 2006 in the not so distant future.
Mm-hmm.
But I would argue that things that are over 10 years old don't have a lot of value.
Okay. Yeah.
So.
So we've got a lot more questions kind of stringing in.
Okay.
So. The grant, I've got a question from Christina Foster. The grant information is based on those 2 to 3 million grants that are coded into the database.
It's actually 7.
Okay, so we've got 7 million grants coded into the database. Do we know what % of grants
I don't.
given that represents?
I don't.
Okay.
Like I said, we used to, and I also hold numbers not so great in my head,
Mm-hmm.
but I do hold that we're over 7 million thing pretty strongly.
Mm-hmm.
But we used to code in the neighborhood of 200,000 to 300,000 grants a year, right? So now, last year we coded over 2 million, right?
Okay.
That's the pace we're on going forward. That's why we are able to have better summaries now because they're just more representative. I think it's particularly good for locations that are not in major markets.
Mm-hmm.
But I think even in major markets, in major cities, it goes so deeply now,
right.
That it's, there is no minimum threshold criteria for whether we code something or not.
Okay. A couple other questions. Thank you, Tracy. So some of these questions aren't necessarily exactly related to what we're covering now, just kind of general FDO functionality
Sure.
things. So,
Yeah.
Once we get to these lists, are we still able to download a PDF?
Yep.
So yeah, that'll still be exportable. And if this is stuff that you're going to get to, I don't want to force the jump ahead either, but.
Yes, I'm going to just show you some tools.
Okay, some all those features. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the questions there and let.
I am going to show the profile.
Yeah, keep going. I do have one question for the geographic area. So will continents be searchable versus countries?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a world data set, so,
great.
It's stronger in the U.S., but,
Mm-hmm.
but that is changing dramatically and quickly.
Okay.
So as we get more international data in. So, whoops. There we go. Okay. So, shall we go back to the today coming soon thing? So here's the good old profile for Ford. We thought this was pretty great when we did it, right? How can we quickly give the user a quick overview of what that funder does without having them read through reams and reams and reams of text? Except there's kind of a basic problem with this. Like, unless you click on it or hover over it, it tells you nothing. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know that you got one bar that's actually bigger than another bar, but you've got to actually click on it to see it. They're also getting a lot of real estate on the screen to just navigation and some basic facts and figures that aren't actually all that actionable. We're also forcing users to get to the meat of this through a series of tabs that may or may not be intuitive for the user. And, this is just a screenshot, but there are, trust me, and as many of you know, this can scroll down for days.
Mm-hmm.
So these 3 charts now look like this. So immediately the user gets that snapshot that we tried to do before, but we didn't quite get all the way there. We also stopped talking like a database, right? So what's being funded, we show folks all of that. Where is that money going? In a nice visual, you can see, that if you're in Maine, you may not be getting as much money as if you're in New York or Florida or Texas. But there's also, it may be all the funding you need. And there are legends here to help you use that. Another big thing, especially for folks who have less experience, is how much do I ask for? So having an overview of the size of the grants is really important because it helps people get past that. Say you've got a $2 million campaign, logic will tell you you're not going to get that from one funder. You're also probably not going to get it from, equal amounts from 10 funders. You're going to have some who are your whale donors, who you can hit up for a lot of money, and others who you need to kind of nickel and dime your way through there. This is intended to help you navigate through this. These snapshots here are the last 5 years.
Okay. And that's indicated there at the top. Ford Foundation's last 5 years at a glance.
We've given you a summary of what this is, and then you get an overview of what the foundation does. The other thing you'll notice, and I'm going to switch now to live demo, and hopefully
we do have a quick question about, on that page up where you're at, the symbols that are next to the names, and you could see it in list view too. What's that green?
This?
Certainly.
So that's Pathfinder. And with any of this iconography that we have in the application, we'll either have tooltips or hover-overs.
Okay.
And then increasingly, you'll start to see it represented elsewhere so that it'll just become more intuitive. So again, gone are the days where there's a whole bunch of wasted real estate to navigation. In order to get these charts 3 wide, we have what we call a hamburger menu here that helps you jump through the entire profile. Here's all your tooling so that folks can email it to themselves, they can print, all of that kind of stuff. Some of this stuff you're looking at, early design, you're looking at pretty close to finished design, but some of these things might shift a little bit, but it gives you the general sense, right? So here, with each of these, if you want to drill into the charts and map detail that you're used to, you're going to do that right from the buttons below, or you're going to jump to a grant list right from here. So top of the fold, what do you need to know? You need to know when the last time grant information was added, how current this is. Profile updates for some foundations don't change all that much, which is why we split these two things. You want to know where the foundation's located in their website. You also want to know things about their LinkedIn profile, right? It'll give you a quick sense of what they're doing, but if the patron is logged into their own LinkedIn site from here, if I'm in my LinkedIn, if I've got LinkedIn open, I click on this, instantly it's going to tell me not only how many people are working for the Ford Foundation, have LinkedIn profiles, but how many are first-degree connections for me, second-degree connections, third-degree connections. One of the fundamental problems a fundraiser needs to get past is getting invited to a seat at the table. We have a lot of foundations that don't accept unsolicited proposals, but please, please, please don't let that be a stop sign. That is just I have to network my way inside. All of those foundations give enormous sums of money away, and if you are a worthy organization, you should demand your seat at the table. It just means that you're going to need to do some networking. Who's Who is another thing, and if I were to click on this, if this were actually live, it would take me to what we know today as the Officer Trustees and Staff section and Donor section. And you'll notice here where we have found a match for a name, we have a LinkedIn icon. Again, it'll tell you how many degrees of separation you are from Thurgood Marshall Jr. and who in your network can introduce, if you are not a first-degree connection, who can introduce you? That's how you're going to get in. So again, that just jumps down. What will happen with this navigation once you get past the charts is this will actually just float with you, so your users will never get lost. instead of the tab feature that we have today, you'll now be taken to scroll down to grants. We tell you what the most common grant amount is for that funder. These are all things that, again, it goes back to that infrastructure thing. Now we'll be able to, you know, when we changed and switched up some of our underlying technology, we can render that stuff on the fly with good performance. And you'll start to get a list of their funding. What today is a list of subjects and geo area served and population groups all in this long cascade of a list. We've actually parsed that out, so we've got subjects and geo area served and population group, and if you'll notice, this mirrors the order of the search forms from before. So you can get a quick, much easier rather on the eye to read and quickly consume than just a long list in no particular order. And then all of that text that you're used to seeing about, you know, the research that we've done on the foundations, what the foundation says about themselves, that is all here as well. You could jump to it. Other funders to consider, this is new. This will only be in this new UI. These are funders who, based on the subject, the geography, and the amount of funding, match up similarly to Ford. Again, this is the mock-up, so don't fact-check me here, please. But these would be 6 funders who match up. Another way to help your patrons navigate through from, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket with Ford. You want to actually have a whole bunch of choices. Application information and links will be here. Request for proposals, if there are any open proposals, will appear here. Giving limitations, something that we know people pay a lot of attention to, are still here. You can jump to them. Great. From the top. And then all the basic financials and 990s. Here, your who's who, and then all this communication stuff. Someday I will clean this up, but we will probably launch before it's cleaned up. This is news items from Philanthropy News Digest, another Foundation Center resource, Glass Pocket, Facebook, Twitter feeds from the foundation themselves, research that Ford has put out that is in our archives on our sister site at Issue Lab, and more connections from Philanthropy News Digest. All that stuff that used to be top of the fold, which is sort of name, rank, and serial number, is at the bottom, because you're not going to take a ton of action from this, right? You can get to it right from the top with contact info, but again, the things that are actionable, that are going to change the way you prioritize looking at that funder and pursuing a grant from that funder, those are the things that are top of the fold. That's the profile. Any questions? Should I pause for questions?
Yeah, one first question that we had, and this is actually a question that I share, but now included under the application information is you click on that to jump to both the limitations. I know that very often when I'm working with somebody, that's the first thing I click when I go to a funder profile is the limitations, so then I know whether or not it's worth it.
Yeah.
So the question was, is there any way to make that more visible or stand out a bit more so it doesn't get lost?
Yeah, so right now it's in the navigation. I do have limitations sort of on the, there's a bullseye with limitations. Because limitations right now is just an open text field. My dream for limitations is that it is a filterable thing, which means we need to get it into our taxonomy. So that is, like I said, on the to-do list. And I think once we do that, we'll change it.
Okay.
But for the time being, given that it still reams with text, we're going to keep it where it is in the short term. But yeah, you're right. It needs to be something that we can bring into the navigation and the filterable. But in order to do that, we need to get it into more of a searchable taxonomy kind of thing. And right now, that's not the root data. Is not in that format. But again, it's on the roadmap to do.
Great. Another question was, so when you do export or email this to yourself, what is sent? What's emailed? Do you have what that looks like? Is it like a PDF of the
Yeah, it'll be PDFs. We'll do some formatting for that, but to make it sort of an efficient page thing.
Okay.
But basically, it's just what you see on the screen.
Okay. And so, yeah, Rachel had a quick question. Where's the information about what the foundation wants in the proposal, and that's in that application information navigation. Can you show that again quickly? Because those are two important spots. So in the left navigation, there will be a link where you can jump down the page directly to that application RFPs and the giving limitations.
Yeah, and let me say, even if you're here, right, it's right there.
Yep. So you would open that menu button.
Yep.
Got it.
Yeah, if you want to, you can either open that menu button to jet past the summary. Yeah, think of this as an executive summary, right? Is there any indication that I should spend more of my time looking at this funder? And then as soon as you get past there, then, like I said, this appears like it keeps repeating, but basically it just floats.
It'll just float down, sure. One other question at the top of this, you can see, so if you are browsing through, but you want to go back and look at the rest of your list, will that search results link that those will just stay standard across any? Great, perfect. Okay.
Good. You good?
Yep.
Okay.
And I know there are still some questions on here we haven't answered yet, but we will.
Well, let's do it now because that's all I got.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay. So our question number one, our exclude grant makers not accepted applications button, is it or isn't it? Where is it?
Quick quiz for Cynthia and Kate. Is that my favorite button or my least favorite button?
It's Tracy's least favorite button. But as many of our in public service, many of our favorite buttons.
It's still here.
And it is still here, so it's still an option. But Tracy, do you want to talk a little bit about why that is your least favorite
Why
button?
I have less than love for that button? I have less than love for that button, and I was informed that that button hasn't always been in the application, and it was not an easy add. I totally understand why people want to use it, but it hurts me to the core that people just automatically, I think people use it too soon in the process. And people just rule out funders. When, like I said before, you know, just because someone is not accepting an unsolicited proposal, that should not be a stop sign. That is, who do I know who can introduce me sign? You know, our own development people here, that's the way they approach the work. You have to expand your network as a nonprofit if you want to have funding. And, you know, if funders, you know, funders don't have to tell you what they're doing. It's their money. They can write a check when they want to write a check. And there are some who may think they know everyone they need to know, but they're always looking for good ideas and always looking for worthy charities to write a check to. You know, some of them just can't handle being inundated with the amount that they would get if they just opened the floodgates.
Because the majority of foundations aren't even staffed, or they maybe have one or two folks, or
so they're making sort of a pragmatic approach to handle volume, but that doesn't mean they're not interested in what the nonprofit is doing. It means they need help navigating through that, right? That help is a network. Right, so if I call up a funder who, you know, Joe's Foundation, and I don't know anyone there, but I see that you, Kate, do, I'm knocking on your door, and you're a nice person, you're going to introduce me. Sure. So the fact that if that is your go-to first move, you've eliminated so many funding opportunities, please, please, please tell people not to do that.
I think one thing that will be helpful is just given that we're able to execute a better search the first time, lessons our need to do that, because I think very often we would just be overwhelmed with results, and that was an easy way to have the results.
Yeah.
Sometimes to say, I can't look through 250 profiles, but I can look at 75.
Right.
But it sounds like perhaps because we're able to get a more accurate look about who's actually funding a specific area, the need to use that as just a kind of easy breakdown of the search might be a little less as well.
Yeah, and it was on us to give you a better breakdown of the search, right? And that's why we've added amount funded. That's why we've given you the grant counts and the list prioritized as they are. That's why we've allowed you to navigate it through the lens of a recipient view, so you can say, okay, this is an organization just like me. They may not be accepting unsolicited proposals, but look how I match up. You know, the core thing with the profile here is, you know, I can't ever recall talking to someone who works for a nonprofit and they couldn't wax poetic about what they do. Impassioned pleas, they care deeply about what they do. What is more challenging when you are that committed to what you're doing and living in the bubble of providing service to people who need services is understanding the rest of the world and what they're about. So it's incumbent upon this tool, this application, to help a nonprofit quickly do that kind of research so that they can say, not only here's what I do, but here's how it matches up with what I can see about your organization, right? So that first conversation with the funder who doesn't accept unsolicited proposals, but you have a person that you know in common, is going to be so much more informed because this profile has allowed you to do your homework in an efficient manner, to see who they're funding, to see how you match up, and to say, okay, I have a ballet company in New York, and we serve, you know, children between the ages of 5 to 7, and I see that you have a history of funding groups like that. Here's what I'm doing with my work, right? So the funder now has said, okay, this person like gets us, I get them, and all of a sudden that first conversation is so much more fruitful. Because even if someone, you know, the other thing I saw with that people who click that button, and I see as I've observed people use this application, is there is something that implies that that is money that they could get faster. And that's just not necessarily true, right? Because just because someone's not accepting unsolicited, that doesn't speak to when they're actually making their payouts. Right. So that's kind of a misnomer, and it's implied, but it's actually not true.
Great. One quick question: will that influence the results in to the grants results for that, the excluding?
So yeah, it would, because it would filter out those funders. So that's another reason why you don't want to do it. Okay. A really good point. Whoever asked that question.
Yep, great.
Thank you.
Okay, so another quick question. This is a great question that I'm not sure of the answer to. In the funder profile, in the giving amounts graph, is that dynamic? Can you click on the bar in the graph to then see what grants are included in that?
So you could click in and you go into the grants detail, and then let me show you what you'd want to do, right? So you've got these sliders, total giving, which would start limiting the grant. Grant amount right here, sorry. I pointed at the wrong thing. It's new. So if you are looking for, if you just want to narrow your results down, and I don't think this is actually functioning. In fact, I know it's not functioning yet. This is a mock-up, right? But if I knew I'm not going to realistically get a grant for $5 million, I'm going to be more in that $25 million range, I would just slide it on down.
Right. Great. Thank you.
Sure.
So a quick question about the taxonomy, going back to the new look. So when you click, will there be a way to either hover or click or something that shows you the definition of the term? Because right now this question is from Deborah. She jumps between the taxonomy.
Yeah, we don't have that definition of term in sight within the search right now. No, but we will have a link to taxonomy.foundationcenter.com, easily accessible in the page. So you're still going to have to do that. It'll just, I think it.
The link will be in the app.
Yeah, we'll have it. Yeah, we'll figure out a place to put it. It may be in the FAQ or in the help section. But it's an interesting idea. I think it would make it kind of noisy, but we can start to think about a design solution for that.
And the definitions, that's definitely helpful when you're looking at things like support strategy, right? These sort of more, once you're getting to kind of the more advanced content that's not as intuitive for.
So that's actually a different question, right? So if you're talking about like the facets themselves, we will have some combination of tooltips or in the FAQs to tell you what these things are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you were talking about the actual terms and things like that.
No, I think it was. I
okay.
think I transitioned it into, I did pivot that question a little bit. But so it sounds like ultimately the taxonomy will be linked somewhere in the app. And Ellen had that question as well. And Richard, we covered this question, well, the number of records that a term has been assigned to. Those numbers are going to be going away because the results will be more.
Yeah, we've actually talked about including them, but I think the 4-box summary actually does a better service, right? Where am I? So back to results, right?
Yeah. So as you search, it generates dynamic.
This is all going to generate on the fly, so you're going to see that. And I think that, and the combination of knowing how to level up, if you will, like go from ballet to dance.
Yep.
Right now, in the left-hand navigation, you can see it, but it's flat.
Yep.
So if you see 74 grants makers in ballet, or grants, or whatever, like how do you're like, okay, that's too narrow, but then you've got to navigate through a flat list to figure out where to go next. That's not all that helpful.
Rachel had a question about pathways. Will pathways still be available?
Yeah, pathways is going to be in there.
If everybody's not familiar with pathways, it's a newer feature that was included in FDO maybe 6 months ago, at least. It's also in Foundation Maps, and it's really a relationship visual where you can track, see your funders and how they relate to other similar organizations.
Yeah, it'll still be in there. It'll be accessible through the navigation. This is not, what you're seeing here is not the final navigation. I don't have a design mock-up of that right now, but I'll get one to Kate because I think if it's not done, it's almost done. Okay. To share out with everyone. And what I haven't shown you is a redesigned homepage for the application, which I think is actually a more natural place for Pathways to live. But first, we're going to release the search and the profile. There may be some slight changes to the homepage, but we will also be looking at that. But that's not at launch.
Right. So everybody has the big important question, which is when? When does this happen, and do fans get an early look at this? All the questions.
Interesting question.
Different one.
Okay, so we are looking at right now getting this a little beta action going soon. We are really close to that, and I think you will see it sometime late June, July.
Okay, so sometime.
Yep, summer, early summer.
Do fans get will they have an earlier look, or?
Yeah, I mean, I can do another one of these certainly when it's actually all functional, and I think we should, just before we actually flip it on. Yeah, we will do that. You won't walk in one day and all of a sudden go, wow, they did that way faster than I thought.
Perfect.
But wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah. And we can share that information as well, just reiterating the timeline as we're communicating with you all in the network, so you know when to expect this. So just keep an eye on our e-newsletters and so on. We've got a few other quick questions that we'll go ahead and try to get through here. So the default search is an AND search, correct, if we're talking about Boolean, every librarian's favorite idea.
Yeah, it's gonna give you everything.
Yep.
It's gonna give you everything.
Great. So that's an easy one. Lydia had the question, which I kind of got it, but not completely. Are both private foundations and nonprofit 990s that are in the 990 Finder going to be available in the new FDO?
So can I just talk about 990s a little bit?
Talk about 990s, Tracy.
I will get back to your question. So my dream here is that we can eliminate the need for people to look at 990s. Now, that's not an absolute thing, right? There'll always be cause for someone to look at a 990, but the 990s can take a lot of time, and the time that a user combs painstakingly through a 990 to get tons and tons of detail I would argue that it's our job to give them a list of 100 prospects with all of the information that they need from a 990, the most important information, I should say, that they need from a 990, consistently formatted. They can see it in the context of other funders. They can see that your total giving related to the amount given in the against the subject criteria that is relevant to your organization. All of those things should, it's our job to package that up for you. Mm-hmm. That said, in the past, when we were coding a fraction of the grants that we were coding, there was maybe arguably more of a need to go look at the 990. That need is going away, right? And, what I am trying to present here and what our team is all feverishly working on, and it's a lot of people working on this, I just get to talk about it, is, how we can code so many grants that you just don't need that, right? You as a user can work smarter, not harder. Mm-hmm. So that's my soapbox on the 990. It's an enormous resource, but really, we're trying to take the friction out of finding money, the friction out of that process. So that's the 990. That said, the 990s will still be available. People dig them. Mm-hmm. I think over time, they will tire of them because all the information that they really need is already been, it's, a friend of mine has this phrase called hire me done, mm-hmm. right? So you're presenting this great resource, and it's our obligation and make it much easier for people to get this information. So the other thing that launched in a small way with Pathways was the concept of a recipient profile. The recipient profile will look very much like it does today with Pathways, but it will, in short order, start to be enriched. Mm. So there will be a set of charts that help you understand, as a user, how a recipient goes about their funding, what the average size of their grants is, what the type of grant makers who fund them, what that makeup is, the types of support that they get. Those are all possible candidates for what the chart summary will be, and with that would be 990s. So it's a long-winded.
No, that was very helpful. One more quick question. Will people be able to search more than one subject area at a time? Yes, so you can add multiple subjects as you're searching. Good to know. And then actually this question is a bit related to the 990s, because I think this is where folks often go hunting through 990s is, very often this question is from Megan. I have clients or a customer or a user comes in and they say, I know X, Y, and Z nonprofit got a grant from 123 Foundation, but it's not showing up in the results.
Yeah, and, again, I'll go back to that. We used to code a lot fewer grants, mm-hmm. right? So that's absolutely, totally agree, a use case for that. And the 990s are still going to be there to do that.
Right. So you still are going to be able to access them in instances, absolutely. And that is honestly a place to look, just given the volume of grants that need to get into the system, but we're doing significantly more. Yeah. So like I said, last year we coded over 2 million grants. We're on a pace to do that. I think actually way more than that this year. So that need, that instance is going to go away, right? But if you're looking at something that I know they got a grant like 5 years ago, sure. Great. Just to reiterate, the Boolean operator is always and when you're adding in the search, correct? And then just some more clarification around the timeline. So just for example, if you see Diane has a class here scheduled for June 29th. Is beta launching by end of June, or is it going to be live to all users? And is there a communications plan also for the FDO subscribers themselves? Yeah, there is. It is fluid right now, so I don't have a hard date for you. You've got a class for the 29th. Interesting. Okay, let's talk about that offline. Yep. Diane, we're going to be right on the cusp of that, I think. Mm-hmm. It's hard to say whether we'll be live then. We may not be. But I would hate
for you to teach folks on the 29th, and then a week later it'd be something different. So let's just take that offline,
Okay.
And see if we're close enough that we can turn it on.
Great. Yeah, and so we'll work, the FIN team, myself and Cynthia will work closely with Tracy to make sure that this is all communicated as soon as can be. We are also working with our, training and program teams here to make sure that we're getting updated materials as well, because we understand that that's a component of this as well, and we want you to be all prepared with.
Yeah, and we are also knee-deep in rewriting the health and FAQ sections. We are rewriting them in general, so they work with old and new, but we are also rewriting them specifically for the new because there are a lot of new things in there. So that is going to be another resource for you. And don't hold your breath, but it looks like we are going to revive the ION FDO blog as another source.
ION FDO.
So just not enough hours in the day, but we're working on it.
Great. Okay, I think that's all that we've got time for today, right? Are we going to? Do we have longer? Maybe I could. I think that we're good. So to those of you that tuned in, thanks so much. Sorry about any of the audio or technical difficulties in the beginning. We'll send out this recording by the end of the week, so you'll all have access to that. Thanks again to Tracy for her time. Continue to send questions our way. For those of you that have some follow-up questions that you submitted, we can get back to you as well. That's no problem. So just stay tuned for these updates. Always check the e-newsletter. We'll share anything that's pertinent and relevant as soon as we have it. So thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.